Yes, moving. I'll be moving. On my way, moving.
You better not be a manhunter.
4 months earlier.
I've been a big fan of the mount&blade series ever since the first game came out, and this month I thought it would be fun to try and inject my game, Gladihoppers, with some basic mount&blade campaign map gameplay. I know I said I wouldn't work on Gladihoppers anymore, but my relationships with my games have a lot of ups and downs, and right now I feel inspired to go back and work on it. To start things off, I modeled a part of Italy and thrown together a prototype of the map movement here using Unity's nav mesh system. I've also made it so that your movement speed is determined by altitude, which I think is pretty fitting since it's generally faster to move around in valleys and along the coasts than it is in mountains and hills. But our guy is looking a bit lonely here, so let's figure out what else to add. I'm gonna begin by creating some code for factions, armies, units and towns that you can tap on and move towards. There are other factions moving their armies around randomly between these towns too. I've also made it so that if you tap on another army, you pursue them until you're within reach of interacting, at which point a menu will pop up where you can start a battle. But before I implement that part of the UI, I want to add event text in the bottom left corner to let the player know what's going on in the world. Since armies will be responsible for 99% of the things that happen in the world, I'll create a few events in the army script that can trigger these texts to appear. I just realized that we're
1
minute and
29
seconds into this video already, and I still haven't established what this new game mode is all about. So to put it briefly, my idea is to have it take place during the Third Servile War between Spartacus' army and the Roman Empire. To spice things up, I've added 2 more factions, a Greek invasion in the south and a barbarian invasion in the north. Factions have a currency called power that they gain on a regular basis from their towns, which they can use to spawn armies. The player can use their faction's power in towns to either recruit units to their army or spawn friendly AI-controlled armies. Towns will also have garrisons that need to be defeated before they can be conquered. Factions are destroyed if they have no armies and towns left, and the game ends when only one faction remains. This should all be fairly simple to implement, and I have now added a battle menu with which I can transition the player from the campaign map into our usual Gladihoppers battle scene. But as you can see, we're not bringing with us any information on the unit stats and equipment. So using content that is already in the game, I will create some different types of units for each faction, as well as a few unique starting characters that will be permanently lost if they die in battle. So now, if you go to a friendly town, you can recruit troops to your army, and I spent way too long working on this menu here, trying to make it understandable to the player that the order in which you place your units will be the order in which they appear in the battle. I might redesign this later on, but anyway, when you select a unit, I want their position in the army to be displayed at the top, plus I want the option of disbanding the unit as well. Sometimes when I'm not sure of the layout, I just take a screenshot, bring it in Photoshop to sketch out my idea, and in this case I think this looks fine. Anyway, now if you engage an enemy, you can view their army in this menu here, and once you actually enter battle, the units will all be there waiting for their turn to spawn in. But there's obviously a lot of balancing to do, because while I do want the best units and the unique characters to be powerful, I don't want them to be as overpowered as they currently are. But now that most of the player functionality is taken care of, I need to start thinking of the AI. I'll make a very simple state machine that will handle the following behaviors: recruit, guard, and attack. If an army has few units, they will head to a nearby town to recruit, assuming their faction can afford the cost. Otherwise, they'll either find a random friendly town to guard, or a nearby enemy town to conquer, or army to attack. As long as an army is not heading to a town to conquer it or to recruit units, they will always be on the lookout for enemy armies to pursue and attack. It's obviously not a complex AI system, but I think it's enough for the purpose of this game mode. So I've implemented the AI unit recruitment and placed a debug text under the army icons so I can see what they're up to. After recruiting, the smaller factions' armies have a pretty desirable behavior where they tend to want to guard or attack enemy armies, but are still also likely to want to conquer towns. Rome, who start out with many towns, will mostly want to guard their own territory and almost never want to conquer, but I'll slightly adjust that behavior in order to avoid games taking too long to finish. Speaking of AI, we recently had our first baby, and she's been needing some adjustments to her behavior as well, so I've been a little bit delayed by that, but now after 2 weeks weeks I'm finally done with most of the AI map functionality, and I'm gonna run some games at high speed and tweak the faction balance. I want Rome to win most of the time, the Greeks and barbarians to win some of the time, and Spartacus Rebellion to win only on rare occasions, since the different factions will serve as easy, medium and hard difficulties. Finding the right balance turned out to be pretty difficult, especially for the Greeks, or the Ptolemaic Kingdom as I've now renamed them, and I think the reason for this is the high concentration of towns in the south that can quickly shift the balance of power when being conquered. I will probably remake the map later on, but I first want to create a save system, since the map currently resets every time we return from the battle scene. Since Gladihoppers is also available for web on Poke.com, I'm serializing the game world into player pref strings. It's obviously not a very good way to handle saves, but it seems to be the easiest way to do it on browsers without involving a cloud save solution, and it works, so why not? At this point, I'm past 3 weeks of developing this new game mode, and the honeymoon phase is officially over. When I start feeling less motivated to work, it's usually because I've strayed away from implementing the fundamental features required to make the game feel done, even when it's not yet polished. This makes developing the game very frustrating, similar to how it would be annoying to draw a face without first fully constructing the head. Well, I guess it's pretty annoying either way, but you get my point. So I need to close the game loop and connect the world map to the main menu through 3 new menus: a start game menu, a pause menu and a game over menu. Now, even though these menus are all unfinished, the game feels much better to playtest because there are no missing parts to break the flow of gameplay. This means I can finally move on to polishing, and the most glaring issue that needs to be dealt with is the lack of a background for our fight scene here. Up until now, all fights in Gladihoppers have taken place in arenas, but for this game mode I want to do something different. I'll make a concept sketch out of the idea that I have before actually creating the scene. I'm going for something pretty simple and ambiguous, since this is the only battlefield scene that there'll be, and I want it to fit regardless of where on the campaign map you're fighting. I usually bring the background into the game as early as possible to see how it looks, and with this first iteration I realized I didn't like the way it fades out up into a hill like this. But after an additional few days of tweaking, this is what it now looks like. I'm quite happy with the result, and when you attack or defend a town, there will be a sprite in the background to reflect that. I also made banners for each faction to give the battle some extra flavor. With that done, I'm gonna try to make an improved campaign map. This time I will use a better reference image and model a more detailed mesh of the entire Italian peninsula. And using a height map as a reference as well, I can more accurately model the mountains. For the map texture, I used various seamless terrain textures on different layers, and then made masks to blend them all together. Then I baked the shadows and ambient occlusion from the terrain, as well as from these tiny trees that I later added. From the map mesh, I also created a new low poly nav mesh to use in Unity, and as you can see, I scrapped the idea of having altitude influence the movement speed. Instead, the only thing that slows armies down is the amount of units they have. I was getting a bit bored of the old town icon, so I made 5 new ones that can represent the different sizes of the settlements on the map. The bigger size a town is, the more power it will generate each in-game day. The town sizes are fixed right now, and I'm tempted to make it so that you can upgrade your towns, but no, I really need to wrap this project up, because it's now been almost 2 months since the start of this video, and I still have several things left to do. One of those is to add some animations to the map icons. Now, I'm a regular viewer of the Kings and Generals channel on YouTube, and one thing I particularly like with their videos is the way armies are destroyed.
And winning the battle.
It's such a satisfying sound and visual effect that I can't resist being inspired by it. After all, this whole game mode is already one big ripoff, so where's the harm? Okay, so a few animations and 1 glass being sacrificed later, and we've now got this. At first, I didn't really like the sound I made, but I have to admit that it's growing on me. I also made effects for when a town is conquered. when an AI army spots an enemy, and when an army recruits new units. The latter two don't actually have sounds though, because they happen so often that it would become annoying to listen to. Fast forwarding another few weeks, and I've now created a bunch of new equipment because I felt like the factions weren't distinguished enough from one another, but that shouldn't be the case anymore. During this time, I've also taken care of the remaining details that needed polishing, as well as fixing some bugs, and the game mode is now as close to finished as it can be.
It's almost harvesting season.
The most noticeable of these changes is that the game now is pausing when you're not moving, just like in Mount&Blade. I didn't want this originally, but it's admittedly better this way. You can also switch between your armies, which is another useful feature. And if there are multiple units and towns where you're trying to select something, a pop-up now appears where you can specify your selection. I've also remade the main menu and finished the start menu for this new game mode. However, there's still something missing. If you watched previous videos of mine, then you'll know that I'm a professional voice actor.
Get a job.
Now, haters would say that recording a few voice lines for your own games doesn't make you a professional voice actor.
What? That really pisses me off.
But I think it's safe to say that they're wrong.
Can't go there. Can't go there. Can't go there. Can't go there. On my way.
So with this final touch added, I've now updated the game, and you can get it on mobile, web, and for PC and Mac. All links are in the description. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Run away.